Hello, 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 and welcome to our podcast. This is for the class Sociology of Music with Julia Mulligan. My name is Amy Quinn. I am a sociology and anthropology major with a public health minor.
And my name is Emma Safina. I am a psychology and communication studies double major with a minor in sociology and anthropology.
My name is Mariah, and I'm a senior political science major.
My name is Daisy, and I am an undecided major.
All right, so this is Mariah speaking, and it sounds like today we're going to be discussing some of the similarities and dualities between Lil Nas X's rise to fame and Eminem's rise to fame in the hip-hop industry. So we were kind of talking about, why don't we start with Eminem? We were kind of talking about how he had to sort of imitate and adopt mannerisms of black rappers to appeal to a mostly black audience, and this is talked about one of the famous scholars, Kajikawa. He writes a lot on history of hip-hop music and how it evolved over time. So first of all, let's kind of start off, if anything, what do you guys think makes authentic rap music? We're thinking about rap music and its origins, and there's a lot of controversy surrounding Eminem's rise to fame and whether his music was considered authentic or if it can be authentic because he was white and it was typically a black-dominated genre. So I'm kind of curious what your guys' thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I remember as I was reading Kajikawa, it was talking about how rap music originated in the working class suburbs or the hood, and I think it was specifically the Bronx in New York. Excuse me. Rap music developed in part due to black individuals trying to find an outlet to express themselves and talk about the hardships that they face of being a black person in America. So being a part of a working class community in the hood, which is typically dangerous neighborhoods, and trying to find a way to express themselves and find a community within the troubling times.
Going off of that, I also think, as far as authenticity goes, it is really being true to yourself and your personality and the values that you uphold in your life, regardless of those pressures from the outside world to act a certain way. So I feel like as far as authentic music goes, it's really just staying true to who you are despite all of the, I don't even know the word I'm looking for here, but people in the outside world not necessarily agreeing with you or your music style.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too because a lot of the rap lyrics we hear too, you hear a lot of artists say keep it real, and that was talked about in a lot of our readings. And when they interviewed a lot of these artists, they kind of, this was especially going around the same time as the Eminem controversy, but they said something very similar. They were more so just focused on keeping true to yourself, staying real to your music, and I guess that's kind of where we'll lead into with Eminem's controversy surrounding his rise to fame. Was he truly being authentic, do you guys think, or do you think he was actually just trying to imitate black culture but make it fit for him by using his race as a way of rising to fame?
Yeah, part of that, at the beginning of his career, a lot of people have been talking, or said that he was imitating everybody because he was new to the scene, and a lot of people called his work unoriginal because they were using, or Eminem rather, was using a lot of the same backbeats and rhyme schemes and a language that a lot of the original black rappers out in New York were using. And so people were like, he's just a white kid that's trying to rhyme and get in on this scene. So he really had to make himself stand out, which is what he did when Dr. Dre was his producer, and his race, being a white person, really came into effect through his music, and especially on his first album. In Kajikawa, they talked about Eminem, and specifically his song My Name Is, which was really his claim to fame and what started it all for Eminem. So within that, his whiteness became this humorous act. He used different slang than what was typical for rap music. So one example that they gave was for marijuana. They, instead of using the typical terms weed or chronic, which was found in existing rap music by BIPOC individuals, he more so used grass, which is has roots within white hippies, and really played off of white stereotypes. So the biggest one, I think, is white trash. So sitting there wearing a wife beater tank top and boxers. and then also doing different voices and tones. They talked about him doing, so like the beginning of his song goes, "Hi, my name is," which is a very like nasally and rapping voice. But then he still had a lot of the same elements as other rappers. So like he used the same rhyme schemes, dressed relatively the same. The only thing that was a little bit different is that Black rappers typically were violent in the sense of like kind of being a gang member or a gangsta, but Eminem used violence more so to portray like the white stereotype of being a serial killer that we hear about in all these true crime documentaries. And so overall, his racial identity and being white really played a big factor in his claim to fame, because he identified that like, hey, I acknowledge that I am white and that I am entering this Black space, and really try to make it clear that he was not trying to imitate or steal this genre from people, but rather add to it and kind of change the conversation about race. And so I just had a question that to get your guys' opinions with, and it was, we see racial identity represented or talked about in the same way in rap music today, or any other genre for that matter?
I feel like another song, I think that was mentioned also in the Kajikawa, was White America by Eminem, which talks a lot. I think he actually mentions his race as a white man in a Black-dominated genre as rap, but he does speak about like his advantages and disadvantages that he's had because of his whiteness. And I think it mentioned in the song how he's kind of like the poster child for white America as opposed to a Black rapper in that Black-dominated genre. So the kind of difference between him and other like Black rappers. So
yeah, I think that there is specific genres that actually try and like refrain away from talking about race. And as somebody, we've talked about, you guys know how much I like country music, but I like a lot of different genres. But it is kind of interesting because even like today there was like the This America song and everything, especially like when the Black Lives Matter movement became more widespread. I think we were really seeing race talked about more in hip-hop genres, and honestly genres that are like dominated by African American artists versus country in general. I mean, I can't even think, we see a few artists who they've had their opinions and they take their stance where they support the Black Lives Matter movement, but they don't really identify it too much in their lyrics. So I definitely think that it's more prominent, at least in certain genres of music than others. But I mean, overall, it comes down to what the artist supports, who the artist is, how popular the artist is, and the content that they want to talk about. Because I've also seen a lot of hip-hop artists that don't want to lose part of their following by refraining away from some of those really polarized issues.
That goes back to the authenticity point that we were talking about earlier, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's
being
like,
authentic to yourself and like your style of music that you want to be producing.
Exactly. And I think, yeah, exactly. So, I think to go as far as to say Eminem isn't authentic wouldn't necessarily be fair. And of course, this is my opinion, but I really do think he was staying true to how he grew up. And he did grow up. He was surrounded. Like he said, even in a lot of his interviews, where he was surrounded by so many people. Like his entire culture, it was dominated by like African Americans, and he very much adapted that lifestyle, which you can see in his lyrics. But yeah, like Amy, you were talking about earlier, he specifically mentioned in his lyrics, and he like really used his lyrics as a way to show that he wasn't trying to take away this genre of music.
Yeah, and I definitely think like I agree that Eminem and his background, he represented authentically within his music. But going kind of back to the race thing and racial controversy in this context of like having it be a part of your music, the biggest ones that I can think of, or biggest one period, is the Vanilla Ice controversy. I think he was in trouble for more than just one reason with like the royalties with Queen. But aside from that, being a white rapper in the 90s or 1990 was tough. But then when it was uncovered that he grew up in a upper middle class household and his real name is Robert Van Winkle, which I am still not over. I just think that's really funny. That's a funny name. But I think Eminem came onto the scene with that in mind and like kind of learned from his mistakes. And even then, like, it's not even just white people in the sense with rap music either. Towards the end of the book, Kajikawa talks about, I think is pronounced Jin, the Asian rapper that entered the scene not too long after Eminem and kind of played off those same type of stereotypes or that same formula, quote unquote, that Eminem used of like mentioning his race a lot to like take that away from their opponents. So like they couldn't use it as a criticism and included it in their music and made everybody aware like, yeah, I know who I am, so just don't mention it kind of thing. And so it's just really interesting.
Yeah, his whole uprising to fame, I think, is very interesting. So why don't we move on to Lil Nas X now? Because he almost represents sort of a duality versus Eminem. This Old Town Road song, like, it exploded, and it was even on the country charts until it got taken down from the country charts. So aside from Lil Nas X, he's making this major transition from hip-hop, and he wanted to incorporate country elements and ultimately create a song that was country, but there was much controversy surrounding this. So I guess, Daisy, I'll take it over to you.
Yeah, so basically it kind of starts with Old Town Road was basically removed from the country music Billboard in 2019, even after it had gone viral, for, and I quote, not embracing enough elements of today's country music. And for fans, this was seen as racist by the Billboard because country music is a white-dominated genre. So, and then I found an article that kind of talks about it, and a tweet, someone tweeted, "If Lil Nas X can't be on the Billboard country list because it does not embrace enough elements of today's country music, then I want every Post Malone song on the Billboard hip-hop list taken down immediately." So there's that kind of duality of, like, should, like, there's an argument of, like, it is Lil Nas X, should he be considered true country or country rap, I guess, as a subgenre. But yeah, so if you guys have anything to say about that.
One thing that really struck me with this, or as I was thinking about it, is the fact that they considered him not country, even though he had a lot of elements of country within his song. But the fact that Lil Nas X himself, self-identified the song as country trap, and you can hear both elements in it, and they still chose not to include it on the Billboard Hot Country list, doesn't make any sense to me, because country is still part of the formula of that song. So it's still country, like everything, well, not everything, but a lot of music nowadays is a fusion of two or more genres that are incorporated, like, with different elements. And so it's clear, like the guitar strumming and, like, the humming in the beginning of the song is definitely clear notes of country music, yet it still wasn't enough to be put on the Billboard Hot 100, which kind of makes me suspect that it is still somewhat due to, like, a racial issue. Not necessarily racism, but just, like, trying to keep the racial oppression of the country music industry on the down low, but he was trying to revolutionize it. But that's another conversation.
Yeah. And then that kind of poses the question, like, what should there be guidelines for what country music should be considered country?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is, like, an interesting topic to me, too, because I guess it kind of depends on what the context of it being removed was, because I, even as somebody, like, listens to country, like, very prominently, I've very grown adapt to the traditional methods of country music, like the banjo playing, which obviously, like, that was originated even, like, post-slavery, and that, like, originated in 1920s. All those elements were incorporated from immigrants, from Spanish slaves, everything. So I guess the song itself, I guess we really have to like analyze and break down some of the lyrics, which it clearly like incorporates elements of him like riding his horse to the Old Town Road. But if you look inside the way he's speaking and his vocal dictation in the song, it doesn't sound very much like we would see in traditional country. So I think no matter what, it would have a really, really hard time arguing that it incorporates every aspect of traditional country in it, but it still does have a banjo and it still does have these lyrics. So as far as whether it's considered authentic country, but we also learned that country is largely what the audience determines it is, and the song very clearly like grew very popular. So I think if the predominant audience of country music said that this was a good song and they wanted it on the Billboard, let it stay on the Billboard. I mean, if it was strictly the audience, and as long as it's, you know, country artists, there's multiple controversies, but authenticity is a very subjective term. So I guess that's my take on that.
Well, the genres are also subjective just because they can be so broad. I guess I don't have a lot
Exactly,
more to say about that than that, but like
Right.
No.
country and like just music in general is just like, it's this big bubble, and like you have your little different categories and your genres of music, but they are so broad, and like Amy said, they overlap, so it's like almost hard to find that authentic, especially in 2023, because everything overlaps all the time, not even just in music, just in life in general. And so it's almost hard to prove that it is authentic or was intended to be authentic country, or, you know, whatever the goal was there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, even just country music itself, talking about, like, the blending of different genres, like, country was originated already as a mixture of, like, 5 different genres. Like, it's a mixture of gospel, blues, rhythm and blues. Like
hillbilly, too, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Hillbilly, too?
hillbilly, a bunch of other different already existing genres, all of which have origins with BIPOC individuals. But it meshed together, and then white people kind of came in and stole it from the forefront so they could profit off of it. And so that alone, it's already, like, country is not one defined thing necessarily, because it's already an amalgamation of 5 different genres. And, like, kind of going back to that tweet, it's like, who cares if Lil Nas X's song isn't country enough? I mean, besides Billboard. But, like, still, I think there was a pretty, like, widespread agreement that Lil Nas X's song was fairly country. But, like, with Post Malone and being on the Billboard hip-hop list, like mentioned, like, I'm sure a lot of his songs are a mixture of country and hip-hop, especially, I think, on his most recent album. And so he's not fully hip-hop either. And having him on the charts while Lil Nas X was taken off doesn't seem fair, but that's also kind of like that racial dynamic. But I don't know. There's a lot of blurred lines, I feel like, that the music industry comes down to nowadays, because every genre has a baby with another genre. Like, there's alternative rock, there's hick hop for, like, country rap music. Every genre is spreading into every other genre, and it's just becoming one big creative space for people to come to. And so trying to define it is just going to get increasingly harder over time.
Yeah, 100%. And I actually heard recently Post Malone has been trying to make country music. And he's performing recently. He had a couple Brad Paisley covers he just posted on TikTok. So I guess it's only a matter of time, really, to see whether he ends up staying on the charts and whether we can really, like, analyze whether this can actually be considered, like, a really bad racial issue in the music industry, and whether it's clearly dominated by white artists. So
If we had all the time in the world, we could dive so deep into, like, white privilege and, like, that kind of stuff, too.
Just, like, talking about how white people have dominated the industry, or just the entirety of the music industry, is such a large conversation, which, like, a lot of the class has been...
Yeah. Elvis King movie, or, like,
Yeah.
The King, talked about Elvis's life, and one of the scholars was, like, mentioning how he didn't, like, appreciate how he couldn't use his powerful influence after he, like, took over a black-dominated genre of music and use it to fight racial segregation at the time. So
Yeah.
that's a whole other topic of conversation. But anyways, so I guess I wanted to talk about one more thing before we end this podcast, because I know we're running out of time here. But so in this sociology and music class, we've really dived deep into hip hop. We've dived deep into country music. And so what are these benefits that you guys have learned about sociology in music? And how do you think you'll continue to use this music throughout your daily life? I mean, we learned about so much stuff in this class. So
I think specifically something that is going to be my biggest takeaway with country and rap music, at least, is that the two genres are wildly different. They have completely different histories, but at the same time, they're so similar. They're like, there's a lot of ways that they're not identical, but like they have a lot in common with each other. Like the racial tensions that are in both in both genres, I should say. Like it's almost like a yin yang, because there's like in rap, not also to like make a joke out of like the black and white literal yin and yang and like the black versus white stereotypes within country and rap music, but just the dichotomy between the two has really opened my mind to look deeper into the music that I listen to like daily, to make the connections, to see like all music really isn't that different from each other. Yeah, that there's different classifications and genres of it, but really we're all trying to communicate something like the same thing. And even with the M.A.D.E paper, a lot of songs are either talking about love, but if not love, then they're talking about like American society and inequalities and working and money and all of that stuff. So it's just going to be a really interesting way to further analyze my music in my own time.
Yeah, going off of that, like as a social sciencey person with, psychology and sociology, I feel like the biggest takeaway for me was more in-depth knowledge of M.A.D.E.'s framework. We see that a lot in communication studies as well, I guess I could say. So I think it's going to make me be a lot more critical of the things I'm listening to. I feel like I'm going to listen to a song and be like, oh, that's like innovation or like something like that. And that's not something I thought I would say at the end of this class, but I feel like now I am for sure going to be more critical with my music and like paying attention to the lyrics and that type of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like even just in general going into this class, I feel like I wasn't that huge of a fan of either country or rap, but I feel like it's just widened my appreciation of all types of music, so I can kind of analyze both sides of country and rap.
Yeah, I guess for me, as somebody, I mean, I have an appreciation for all genres of music. There's obviously one I listen to the most, but yeah, Amy was talking about how similar the two genres are, but I never really thought much about lyrics of songs until we learned about M.A.D.E.'s framework and his 5 adaptations to inequality. It's like every single time I listen to a song now, and I don't know if this is a blessing or a curse, but I can't like think, I'm like, okay, what is this person doing? And then I'll like criticize, I'm like, oh, you're a conformist. Like, don't do that. Like, so it's just like listening to songs now, it really opens up and it gives you really huge appreciation for the songs. But then it also allows you to tie in common themes to these genres and all this class consciousness, and you really break down these intersecting identities, and you can see and analyze music in such a more sociological way.
Yeah, for sure.
Which, I mean, I'm sure that's the point of the class. I mean, it helps us analyze music in this framework. So
yeah, I don't know. I've definitely had my appreciation for both country and rap music rekindled through this class, and I've caught myself doing the exact same thing of like sitting there, I'm like, oh, I wonder what songs would like fit under M.A.D.E.'s framework, which is such a nerdy thing coming from a sociology major. For sure. But since we're out of time, I'll just wrap this up quick. I don't know, this class has been really interesting to help us learn more about country and rap music, and I think it's really helpful to analyze both the histories of Eminem and Lil Nas X and the potential controversies that have come through them, to look at the broader genres of country and rap and all of their shoot-offs. So that's all we got for you today. Podcast out.